Today on Tactical Tuesday, John and I are going to be breaking down hands played by one of our top CPG wolves who's currently battling in the 1K and 2K NL streets. The spots that we cover are going to be squeeze spots, so tricky situations where somebody's calling in the middle, you face a 3-bet. It's a somewhat common scenario when you're battling against white belts and regs. So with that said, sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. As always, this is your host, Coach Brad Wilson. I'm joined by my associate coach, John Chai. How are we doing, John?
Doing good. I picked these two hands out for this episode, and so I'm pretty excited to get going. Neither of these are my hands, and honestly, the theme for the episode that I'm sure you guys have heard in the intro about this being an episode about squeeze spots and playing squeezed pre-flop hands is definitely true. But if I had to be honest, man, I just saw these two hands from one of our wolves, submitted from one of our wolves, and this guy is just balling the fuck out on this pool, and I was just could not be prouder, could not be more excited about how well it seems like this guy's playing. His recent results are just through the roof. So honestly, just wanted an excuse to share some of the insane stuff that this guy is doing to get such a what most people would think is a unattainable win rate at these stakes.
All right, and full disclosure, I haven't seen these hands, so I guess we'll see.
Let's see if they're Coach Brad approved at the end of the day. I mean, I could very easily see these hands just being really cool, and then somewhere along the line you'd be like, okay, I don't know, but
well, we'll see. We've already done some Tactical Tuesdays where we've inadvertently dunked on some submitted hands by the Wolves. So hopefully this will be one that is very prideful and feel good about afterwards. So 3-handed, 5-10 no limit. The hero opens to $25 on the button. The small blind calls, generally indicating that the small blind is one of them that are white belts. The big blind, hopefully, squeezes to 130. And now we're kind of at our first decision point, whether to 4-bet, whether to call. I think both are really on the table.
Yeah, I think Ace Queen definitely has some good properties for both 4-betting and calling. I mean, we can just kind of, I guess maybe just cut to the chase here. This wolf decides to 4-bet the spot. I think there's good reasons for doing both. Maybe the reason for doing a little bit of extra 4-betting in the spot is that I think the squeeze is going to come at a higher than usual frequency once a fish or a white belt flats the small blind. I think this is just something that's almost just part of the meta at the 1K pool, is that like the big blind squeeze is extremely wide, trying to isolate the fish, trying to take the pot down. A lot of good things can happen when you squeeze wide in the spot. It's something that we coach our wolves to do as well. So think that you can just get a little bit of extra immediate fold equity here if you were to 4-bet. And the flip side is that if you call, you get to see the flop versus a range that's going to include a lot of hands that you're dominating with ace queen high.
And potentially going 3 ways with the white belt involved too, right? Like when you 4-bet, you generally push the white belt out. I mean, it's not unheard of that the white belt just calls the 4-bet. That's something that is certainly in their range, but generally they will fold. The wolf makes it 265, so 4-bets to 26 big blinds. A little bit big. White belt folds, and the big blind calls. So we see a flop. There's 555 in the pot. Our hero has 859 behind, so the SPR's less than 2. 10-6-4, 10 of clubs, 6-4 of diamonds is the flop. The big blind checks. Now the action is on hero.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can. I'm actually curious about what your thoughts are on the swap texture specifically. Like most 4-bet pots, I'm advocating for just range betting quarter pot. Is there some reason you would deviate from that plan or that strategy due to the board texture or due to just the pre-flop action. This is not your typical 4-bet pot.
Yeah, I think I would still c-bet here with 2 overcards and backdoor straight draw and backdoor flush draw. I think it's just a hand that is good enough to start with a c-bet on the flop. Don't really know if we're checking back many overpairs on the flop. I think maybe sometimes we should. But I think in general, like the flop check back is going to be pretty heavily towards hands that want to realize additional equity, like ace king, ace queen, ace jack type hands, along with, some occasional traps with like aces or tens. And, the big blind is just going to be barreling a ton. They're going to be probing the turn a ton, facing flop check back. So I would rather realize all my equity here with ace queen, start with a c-bet, and expect to get raised like very rarely. Primary hand that I think raises would be flush draws in general, due to just that it's a hand that wants to realize fold equity. It doesn't really matter or care what happens. We have the queen of diamonds, so we block some of their natural check raises. I think if they have a set of tens, they're probably not going to be raising facing a c-bet. They're just going to call. So anyway, it's just the hands that could check raise, maybe a hand like queens, maybe a hand like jacks, if they don't jam jacks or queens pre, could be decent candidate. But yeah, I just think because check raise frequency is going to be low, we have a hand that wants to realize, I would start out with a bet.
I'm guessing, so this player checks back. So here we go with the inadvertent dunking, just right off the bat, on the flop in the first hand. One thing that I am guessing that this player is thinking about, or this specific wolf is thinking about, is that, the turn's going to get probed quite frequently when I check back this flop.
Sure.
And maybe my hand is just good enough to like
call,
trap / call the probe if I expect them to squeeze very wide and probably peel the 4-bet with, slightly wider than normal range, given that they're squeezing a slightly wider than normal range.
Yeah.
And then maybe they just get to the turn with like lots of hands that are, extra hands that are going to probe compared to a normal 4-bet pot. So, that's the logic that I could see being used here with a hand like ace queen. But yeah, flop does go check. I'm with you. I would probably just be quarter potting the flop with 2 overs, backdoor Broadway, backdoor diamonds. Unlikely to get check raised, like you said, when we have a diamond in our hand ourselves. So we're going to over realize our equity, just given the specific characteristics of our hand. But flop does go check.
All right. There's a 3 of hearts. And the big blind now bets half pot. So half pot's fairly big for this situation. Going to lead to an SPR of, about 0.5 if we call the turn, which presumably we do call the turn. But villains, hands that they're betting for value here, probably like 10x plus, I would think. Something along those lines. So like ace 10, king 10, maybe. Hero does block ace 10, hero does block queen 10. So villain's repping fairly thin here, it seems.
And the reason that you're saying that is mostly due to the probe size.
I would think so, yeah. Like,
assuming,
like jack 10 or 9-10 wants to get called by worse hands. And as they scale up size, it makes it harder for worse hands to call. Now, in this case, if they are targeting like ace king and ace queen because they expect their opponent to call ace king and ace queen, then they could size up, right? And I would say like calling wider is an adjustment to what presumably villain is. Our adjustment presumes villain's not thin value betting top pair for half pot, and if they are, then our adjustment gets absolutely murdered.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's how I would that would be my read on the situation too. Is that this is a very, very large probe size given the situation, given the SPR, given what the SPR on the river would be if we were to call this bet. And generally the way poker theory works is that the larger you are betting, the stronger range of value hands that you're representing. One thing, an easy trap that's possible to fall into when you start sizing up like this is that it becomes easier and easier to be over bluffing, right?
Sure.
It's just, it's not like the range of value hands that you have just magically expands just because you pick a larger size. And so I think one of the benefits, one of the reasons to call down here with ace queen facing this size, or one of the good things that you can kind of count on when you're facing this size, is that now you're in the land of, hey, the big blind could just easily be over bluffing this spot when he picks this size. When he picks a smaller size, it becomes a little bit harder because they're representing a wider value range, right? They could be betting hands like 6-7 or 5-6, pocket sevens, pocket eights, pocket nines, all of those hands. But once the big blind comes out with this size, it's, you can start eliminating most of the hands that are below 10x. And yes, like you said, the big mistake in our assumption, or the big mistake that we could make with that assumption, is that we just start bluff catching with these with hands like this, and then realize, oh wow, they are actually value betting a really wide range on the turn. And we're making a mistake. But I think that's less likely than finding out that the big blind is over bluffing.
Yeah, and the over bluff would come from them splitting sizes on the turn and using quarter pot with some of their, as you said, like 9s, 8s, 7s, 10x type hands, and then half pot with things that are not 10x and pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 7s, right? So that's where the over bluff would come. Hero calls. River's a 5, so is a 4-liner. 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. There's 10, 55 in the pot. And villain jams. So, yeah, like heroes, 600 to win 1,600. Really hard for villain to have a 7.
I think the 7s that I would expect to see would be 7-8 suited, right? Like a hand that flopped the double gut shot, decided to bluff the turn, and now gets there.
Yeah.
Like we said, we started eliminating hands like pocket 7s from his range once he picks such a big size on the turn.
Maybe ace deuce suited could be another potential one. The bottom end, but they're really lacking value and have a fair amount of bluffs to pull from, I would think. Down.
Yeah, I think this is like the logic that we're using right now on the river is kind of just an extension of the logic that we're using on the turn, where it's like, hey, it's really easy to be over bluffing for that size. You're repping a very, very narrow value range. Now on this river, you're repping an even more narrow value range, I assume, because I think it's like more of a stretch that they just jam 8s and 9s on this.
Sure.
On this river, not to say that like we just show up to the river with tons of straights or anything like that in a 4-bet pot. We certainly don't, but still think it's unlikely that they're just jamming 8s and 9s on the turn. And now there are also, bricked flush draws that we can throw into there.
I think you misspoke. You said jamming 8s and 9s on the turn.
Oh, excuse me, on the river. I think it's unlikely that they do that. Again, think it's unlikely that they pick those hands for the turn size anyway. So a lot of removal to, thin value in the spot. And once you can eliminate thin value and have, even a small inkling, I think that like they're likely to be over bluffing based on this turn size and river action on the run out. It's kind of scary still to call down with ace queen.
Sure.
But it becomes much more reasonable where like, if you think that your opponent is over bluffing a node, generally what you're going to see in, for example, in solver land is that all your bluff catchers just become pure calls, and ace queen might not necessarily look like a bluff catcher to most people here at first glance. But I think this is actually going to be one of the stronger bluff catchers that we can have in this situation, given that we block some pre-flop traps in terms of aces, so we don't really have to worry about them, slow playing aces pre-flop. We do block hands like ace 10, queen 10, which is nice too. So yeah, I think that this is just again, on the surface, I'm not saying like I go around making calls like this all the time, but kind of in the hands of a player as capable as the Wolf that submitted this hand, I'm very happy to give them credit for having just strong logic for finding these bluff catches with ace queen high.
Yeah, for sure. And very nice. Villain ends up with the king jack of clubs. So they did bomb the turn, and they decided to say that they've got a set or ace 10 plus on the turn and a straight on the river, and didn't make it through. Ran into the wrong hombre. Hand number 2. By the way, if you're a big fan of hand number 1. I think you should like and subscribe and comment in the YouTube section. That's what the producers of Tactical Tuesday would want you to do, I believe.
If you want to learn how to win 10 BBs per 100 or even more, like this wolf here that we're showing off, make sure you submit an application at cpgwolves.com.
Yeah. If you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. We'll run into you. And
who doesn't want to win 10 BBs per 100?
I don't know. I can't. That's John, by the way. I can't promise everybody wins 10 big blinds per 100. I would say that almost anybody on the planet is better off with having a giant support network and regular coaching than not having either of those things. So, hand number 2, button opens to 3 big blinds. Button is hero. Once again, the small blind calls and the big blind squeezes to 130. Hero's got a queen and a 3 of spades. So
probably wondering how we get to a flop.
Probably wondering what happens. And unlike the last ace queen, where I think there was an argument for calling or for betting, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that there's not much argument for calling and probably a better argument for betting.
Yeah, so this wolf clearly not afraid to take advantage of the read that the big blind is going to squeeze very wide in these,
sure,
button open, small blind flat situations. And
surprise, surprise. Queen 3 suited. Let's put in 25 bigs. Flop is ace 8-4 with 2 spades. All in all, pretty good flop for the IP 4-better. Ace high being really nice. Flopping actual flush draw is also nice. So I just can't imagine Wolf doing anything but betting a quarter here on ace high. Please bet a quarter. There we go. We did it. Opponent calls. Turn is the king of clubs. So ace king 8-4. There's 792 in the pot. The big blind checks.
What do you like here? Seems like there's maybe a little bit more room for debate on this turn as to whether to c-bet again or not than there was on the flop. The flop, I agree with you, is just a slam dunk spot. Ace high board. We have some real equity, obviously, with our flush draw to start putting some money in the pot. Don't think we're getting check raised very frequently on the flop. Probably could say some of the same things on the turn.
Yeah, I don't think we get check raised on the turn. I think it's should be very rare that we get check raised on the turn. So, it's I'm on the fence, honestly. I think you could check behind and some good things can happen where you can jam rivers facing checks, because I think you have a lot of value that could check behind on the turn. Like, I think it's not like crazy to think that ace king or a set of aces or a set of kings could just check behind on the turn and play the river as a jam versus check or a call all in versus bet. And so like that gives credibility to checking behind. I think that there might be some removal to like ace queen, or potentially like a set of eights, or maybe ace 8 suited if we check behind the turn and Dylan checks the river, giving us a river target that has less value in it if we decide to bluff. So I think you could go either way. I'm on the fence, probably leaning towards more checking behind and doing something on the river based on the data points that I receive. I
really like that. Oh, sorry.
I also don't think we fold out like an ace with bet jam. Like, I think it's like pretty ambitious to fold out an ace. Or like our folding target is something like 8x, something like 9s or 10s or jacks, some kind of mid pocket pair type hand. But like trying to get ace jack to fold, I think is stretching our aspirations.
Yeah, and kind of what you're saying about those full targets, the 8x through pocket jacks, is that we can fold them out here, but the cost of trying to fold them out here is sometimes just running into ace-x. Or we could check back the turn here and try to fold out that same range on the river, because they're probably going to check all of those hands on the river one more time and save ourselves from just putting it all in versus an ace, because a lot of their ace-x is likely to value bet the river once the turn goes check. So realizing the check on the river is a huge deal in terms of how successful or how frequently our bluff is going to be successful.
Yep, for sure. So we check. Villain checks the river. Now it's an interesting sizing options here. I don't think you have to jam, especially given the targets that we discussed on the turn. I think we could bet small probably, and accomplish much of the same things that we wanted to accomplish. Fold out pocket nines. I think it's going to be hard if we bet a third for pocket nines to continue. Like, I just think it's really difficult.
And kind of just tying it into our conversation in the first hand of this episode, when we bet small here, that allows us to rep a wider value range, right?
Sure.
Now we can have hands like ace five suited and, just
maybe king queen. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe even king queen. Whereas when we jam here, we're really just repping, ace queen plus, probably something like that. And so, yeah, I think in some ways it becomes more believable, or we might even, in some strange way, the smaller size might even garner us a little bit more fold equity than the larger size would, especially against like thinking good regs who realize that, hey, when they jam here, they probably don't have king queen or ace five suited anymore. So maybe I should call with my nines because it's easy to be, over bluffing this spot. Whereas when we pick the smaller size, they're saying, well, I could just easily run into a better hand than nines or tens or jacks. And maybe they're more likely to fold those hands when we're repping a wider value range. That's a really interesting thought about river sizing.
Yeah, and for the podcast listener, the final board is ace 8-4 king deuce. There's no flush. Hero has queen high. What does Hero do? Hero does go ahead and jam.
He picks the safe option. Well, I don't know. I mean, now that we've talked about it, this could easily feel like the more dangerous option, but
I think both sizes are gonna make money, and it's a matter of efficiency more than anything else. And we do generate the fold from pocket tens with the queen three. So, seems unlikely the pocket tens calls a third. But better safe than sore, as they say. Well, it's a good episode. Recapping some pretty nice hands played by our friendly neighborhood wolf that's out there just smashing some folks in the 1K and 2K streets. Very, I have to say as to the listener that, man, it feels good having players that are playing 2K and L and winning at 10 plus big blinds per 100 over a decent data set. Like that feels, it's a feeling that, I feel like I've been chasing for a few years now, and it just feels really, really nice for that aspiration to kind of become reality, that we got players at across a spectrum of stakes from 200 to 2K and L, and they're feasting pretty much at every single one.
Yeah, playing high stakes, playing great, playing at winning at an incredible win rate. Yeah, I mean that's as coaches and
it's a dream.
Yeah, the heads of the CPG Wolves CFP. That's all we could ask for.
Yep. And with that said, that's all we got for this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday.
See you next week.
See you next week.
Don't miss out on our next great poker adventure. Hit that subscribe button and join the CPG family.
This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, You can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.